Chrono Odyssey might be one of the best looking MMOs we've ever seen, but when it came time to actually partake in the playtest, it fell incredibly short of that expectation. Let me start off by saying I'm not a big MMO guy. I've dabbled a few times here and there, and I've played all the trends when they've become popular. However, it's never been my genre, except for Elder Scrolls Online. I've really enjoyed that game, and I've put more time into that than probably all the other MMOs I've played together. So, with everything I'm about to say about this terrible MMO experience, have that in the back of your head that I'm not some hardcore MMO fan. I'm just open minded to games when they come out, and I like to try new stuff. The Chrono Odyssey playtest. Let's not waste any time. It sucked. This game has had awesome cinematic trailers, and even when you first started this playtest, it seemed really cool as it had one of the better, more in depth character creation setups for a game. It really reminded me of Dragon's Dogma 2 and Saints Row when they released their character creations before the game came out. But much like those games, it really seemed like this was the most polished aspect of the playtest. Combat felt stiff and boring. When it did work, it was enjoyable, but for the most part, it felt like I was just smashing one button and just waiting for my character to do the movement. The voice acting is flat, and that's even when there is voice acting. I understand it's a playtest, but 99% of this dialogue in this game was just read. The combat felt stiff and boring, although it did show a little bit of promise. The voice acting was flat. I understand it's a playtest. However, I feel like 99% of all the messaging in this game was just letters as opposed to actually listening, which can kind of kill the vibe for a lot of people. The movement was okay, nothing special. I did have to do a lot of double inputs on my controller, and I didn't see too many people also mentioning this, so I don't know if it was specific to me, but I felt like a lot of things I did, I had to double input the inputs on my controller, whereas on mouse and keyboard, I don't know if you had to do that. One of the bigger claim to fames about Chrono Odyssey is that it's going to bring Souls-like boss fight into the genre, and there were a lot of bosses in this playtest. However, every single one of them felt way too overtuned, especially for a playtest. It didn't feel fun, it didn't feel enjoyable, it didn't feel like I was learning or improving, it just felt frustrating. The world design, the area and where we played, it just kind of felt unfinished. A lot of the NPCs just look like copy-pasted characters of themselves. The environment did look okay if you could run it on higher settings, but it didn't really jump at you like you would expect it to do, especially in the trailers that were showed about this game. Nothing really felt rememberable. Everything just felt forgettable. Nothing pulled me in. Nothing felt like it was worth pushing through. Now, I will give compliments when they're due and warranted, and this game does actually have one good thing that I keep thinking about, is that the weapons were actually pretty cool. Each one of them had their own feel, and it seemed like there was a real effort put into the weapon itself. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the combat was pretty one dimensional. However, what I had more fun doing was just sort of spamming my abilities while there were no enemies around and just kind of imagining what it could feel like. Also, there was a day one patch after the first day. The devs released a patch that really fixed a lot of the bugs. The performance was definitely improved. Things like actually added music to the background was there. It felt more responsive on my controller on day two than it did on day one, and a couple of quality of life things were added. However, if those are things you're fixing on a day one playtest patch, I think the core gameplay is a little bit more concerning. Now, I'm not here to just bash the game. I really think this game has potential. But as I always say, if I'm going to speak negatively about a game, I need to have a solution. So here's my solution. We all know I don't like talking negatively about games, but when I do, I have to come up with a solution or some sort of thought process as to what they could do to fix it. So here's my solution for Chrono Odyssey. If this is truly meant to launch in 2026, they need to pump the brakes hard. MMOs are one of the hardest genres to break into and keep players engaged. If Chrono Odyssey launches in this state, it won't survive. Not when players have so many other options. It's gotta feel good to play from the start, and right now, it doesn't. Pretty graphics and flashy trailers might grab attention, but if your game's not fun or enjoyable, it won't last no matter what. Not in 2026, not ever. Chrono Odyssey has a skeleton of something, but right now, it's a skeleton of nothing. It needs more time, it needs more polish, and it needs a lot of effort. If the developers take this playtest as an opportunity to readdress their timeline and readdress the potential of this game, I think it might be something successful in the future. However, if they rush to release the game, if they release the game a little bit better than this, it'll be dead on arrival in a genre that constantly kills its games.